We're hearing a lot of talk about things that, again, you wrote a book about, the lead up to January the 6th. All the people around Donald Trump before January the 6th and on January the 6th telling him to stop the riots, to call his people away, to call them off. And it's weird from Cassidy Hutchinson, even in the middle of the riots, when they were calling for the hanging of Mike Pence. Mark Meadows said he couldn't do anything because Donald Trump agreed with the crowd and believes that Mike Pence basically deserved hanging, that they were doing nothing wrong. Talk about that and talk about how, again, for people like Kevin McCarthy, who's trying to defend Donald Trump now after attacking Donald Trump, how Donald Trump was almost alone in the White House in agreeing with the rioters, that everybody else was coming down on him saying, call this off, from his children to his lawyers to all of his staff members.
Joe, this, of course, began on Election Day. That's when the big lie Donald Trump took to the American people. Of course, he had been sowing the seeds of that for months and months, suggesting that the election would be rigged, that it would be unfair, stirring the anger among his supporters, that the only way he could lose would be that if it was taken from him. And then we had weeks worth after the election in which he claimed that he won. He was given space to do so by the Republican Party, complicit in the big lie. And he surrounded himself by true believers. A lot of the guardrails that had been in the White House fell away. Bill Barr, others, finally, at the 11th hour, decided to abandon him because they wouldn't go along with his election lies. So all those who were left were the enablers, the Sidney Powells and Rudy Giuliani's and Michael Flynn's of the world. And with Donald Trump's tweet saying that January 6th would be wild, a crowd gathered there, stormed the Capitol at his behest, committing violence in his name. And he retreated to the White House. And everyone from, at that point, Chief of Staff Mark Meadows to his daughter and senior advisor, Ivanka Trump, all told him this needs to stop. Kevin McCarthy called in and said this needs to stop. The vice president of the United States, whose life was in jeopardy, who the crowd was trying to hang, said this needs to stop. These people need to leave the Capitol. And Donald Trump did nothing. He retreated to the private study off the Oval Office, watched on television, cheered along, and had to be goaded, forced hours later to finally put out a tweet asking people to go home. And at that point, dozens of people were injured and some people lost their lives that day.
So two sources have confirmed to NBC News the former president received a letter from special counsel Jack Smith this week informing him that he is the target of a federal investigation into efforts to overturn the legitimate results of the 2020 election. A target letter does not definitively mean a person will be charged, but in most cases, it is a precursor to an indictment. So, Jay Johnson, big picture, I mean, this is clearly looks like it's officially happening in some way, shape, or form. We'll have to see exactly what an indictment looks like if and when it comes. But talk about the challenges of connecting Trump to this crime or this riot or what happened at the Capitol. It is shocking to hear in the January 6th committee testimony all the way he behaved that day and throwing food against the wall or whatever, you know, lurching at someone's neck and talking about potentially, you know, not wanting to say anything about tamping down the violence, but linking him to the crime. Will that be more challenging?
Good question, Mika. Good morning. In a sense, the answer is no, because what Donald Trump said to incite this insurrection is a public speech that everyone has seen now numerous times. He is on the record, and witnesses who testified before the congressional committee who were around him on January 6th are also now on the record. I think the challenges here are two. One, we're hearing that Jack Smith is contemplating a charge of conspiracy to defraud, which is a relatively amorphous white-collar charge. I think it's in the national interest to charge in a way that correlates to what we all know happened on January 6th. January 6th was the very definition of an insurrection. an insurrection, inciting an insurrection, giving aid and comfort to an insurrection is also a criminal offense. So I believe it's important for the Department of Justice to call this what it is. Second, I also believe that the credibility of our justice system is very much on the line. DOJ is methodically prosecuting those who were on the ground at the Capitol on January 6th. Some of them are being sentenced to prison terms of years. What about the man who incited this insurrection? And Joe, you touched on this at the top of the show. What about Donald Trump, the man who lit the match and then threw it on top of the conflagration? Does the man who sat in the private dining room off the Oval Office to watch it all unfold get a pass, while those who were on the ground, even senior level Proud Boys, Oath Keepers, do they all go to jail? But Donald Trump, the man who incited this insurrection, gets a pass. So in a sense, the criminal justice system is very much, the credibility of the system is at stake here.
And Anthony, I guess I'm going to follow up on that. We can tap your expertise as a former DOJ spokesman, and now you're on the outside, so you can really tell us what's happening. So why has it been so slow when it comes to any action being taken with Donald Trump?
So NBC's Lester Holt asked the Attorney General this exact question last July. I was the top spokesman at DOJ at the time, and the Attorney General spoke to that with a level of conviction that I have rarely seen. And he told Lester Holt then that anyone who is criminally responsible for the events surrounding January 6th would be held accountable. I almost get chills now thinking about it because I rarely seen him speak with as much conviction then. Now, my mother, on the other hand, had the exact same question as you. I'm from rural North Carolina. I went home last summer and she asked me, she says, boy, I just wish your man would go ahead and do what he needs to do. Right? After that interview, she called me up and she said, he's like a quiet storm. And that's what I think we are starting to see, the fruits of all of that work that happened before Jack Smith was appointed in November. All of those things are now starting to spring forth.
By the way, you have two graduates of Morehouse College side by side on this show. What more wisdom can you?
I was going to say,
we're Eddie. Yeah.
This is enhancing the discussion, to be sure. Thank you both, gentlemen, for that. And we certainly also should give credit to the House Committee on January 6th,
Absolutely,
which brought a lot of this to the forefront and almost provided something, a roadmap for what the Department of Justice has done. Michael Steele, obviously, the legal implications of this are so important. Frankly, they're historic. But let's talk politics, too, because it's not just that Donald Trump is a former president potentially facing another federal indictment. He's the leading Republican candidate for president now facing another federal indictment. So let's get you to weigh in on the politics of this. Not surprisingly, yesterday we heard from Chris Christie and Asa Hutchinson. Those are the two GOP contenders who were willing to go after him. They did, as you'd expect. The others, far more muted, suggesting that the fault here lies with DOJ, not Trump. How do you see this playing out in the weeks ahead? Could this shape the GOP primary field in any way? We know it's going to hurt Trump next year, at least we assume it will in the general election. But what about now? Is there anything going to change in the GOP race?
Yeah, I'm not going to make the assumption that it will hurt Trump in the GOP election. I'm working off data points that are a little bit closer to the ground. Donald Trump didn't lose by 8 million votes. He lost by 78,000 votes over 3 states in the Electoral College. That's the election. And he picked up, in terms of popular votes, 7 million more votes than he got in 2016. He is the leading candidate for the nomination. He is the nominee de facto of the Republican Party until someone takes it from him, and no one is in a position to do that as we speak. Late August, they're going to have a debate. Donald Trump won't be on the stage. He will have counter-programming, which will garner more support than those standing on that stage. So the direction of this narrative is in one direction. We need to get our heads out of looking at this as a conventional race. It is not. It has never been a conventional race, and it won't be a conventional race. We are playing four-level chess here with Donald Trump. We're fixated on the legal stuff, rightly so, and all the smart people who need to do that are doing that. But at the end of the day, what's going to rule the outcome is not what a court does, but what the court of public opinion decides. And that court of public opinion is on a razor's edge when it comes to Donald Trump. Do not underestimate that. We are already behind where we should be in setting the narrative to keep this man from regaining power in this country. There are MAGA heads who run election boards, who are controlling political operations on the ground in state parties. They are infiltrated in places you do not think they are. We're focused on the fact, when Donald Trump calls for people to show up to defend him when these charges and no one shows up, that's not a problem for them. They've figured it out. They don't need to expose themselves the way they would have in the past, putting a dot on their forehead for federal officials, for the deep state to identify them. So we need to be smarter tactically and politically going into this thing. The legal folks are going to do what they need to do. But I'm telling you, the typical Trump voter don't give a damn about what any lawyer says about Donald Trump or what anything that comes at him from the Justice Department, however that lands.